Welcome back to our AI course series. I'm Dr. Shan Shi, and in this lesson, we move from the internal logic of AI and business model to something even closer to everyday experience: service and marketing. If you look at the title on this slide, today's focus is very practical. We are going to explore how AI is changing the way companies serve customers, communicate with customers, and design customer experiences. So this lesson is really about one big question: how does AI transform the front line of business? So let's begin with the objective of today's lesson. This slide tells us that our goal is to explore how AI transforms customer experience and frontline services. That is important because many people still think of AI mainly as a back-end technology, something used for data analysis, logistics, or operational efficiency. But in reality, AI is now moving into the customer-facing side of business. It is no longer only behind the scenes. It is now speaking, recommending, responding, generating, and sometimes even representing the brand. So today, we are looking at AI not only as a tool for efficiency, but also as a tool for interaction and experience design. This is our roadmap for today. If you look down the slide, you can see three major parts. First, we explore AI in services, especially the shift from body to brain, from physical form to intelligent type. Second, we examine AI in marketing, especially the transition from prediction to generation. Third, we look at the full dimension of customer experience in AI-enabled environments. Okay, so finally, we wrap up with summary and discussion. So today's lesson connects technology, service systems, marketing applications, and consumer psychology in one integrated framework. So now we begin with a conceptual map. If you look at the slide, you can see a cross-shaped coordinate system. There is a robot-like figure above and a virtual human-like figure below, while the horizontal dimensions contrast discriminative or analytical AI on the left, and with generative AI on the right. This is what we mentioned in the previous lesson. This is a very useful opening map because it tells us that service AI can be classified along two dimensions at the same time. One dimension is the body or interface. Is the AI physical or virtual? The other dimension is the brain or intelligent type. Is it mainly analytical or is it generative? So before we jump into examples, this slide gives us the basic lens we will use to see service AI more clearly. So now let's focus on the first dimension, body or embodiment. If you look at the images on the slide, the left side shows physical service technologies, a robot vacuum, a serving robot, and a humanoid service robot. On the right side, we see virtual interface such as chatbot, app-based customer support, and voice assistance. What I want to emphasize here is the line at the bottom. Both possess the ability to sense, think, and act. That is the key point. Even though one has a physical body and the other exists only through software, both are still service systems that can perceive information, process it, and respond. So the difference is not whether they are intelligent. The difference is how that intelligence is embodied and delivered to the customer. Now we move to the second dimension. The intelligence behind the service. If you look at the diagram, the upper half shows discriminative AI. It starts with data, determines a boundary, and then output a decision. On the lower half, we see generative AI. It began with prompt, use creativity and iteration, and then produce content. The animal images on the right side are a helpful teaching cue. In the upper path, the system distinguishes between categories such as cat versus dog. In the lower path, the system does something more open-ended. It creates content rather than simply labeling it. So this slide shows us that analytical AI is mainly about deciding among options, while generative AI is about producing new output. Now, the two dimensions come together. If you look at this slide, you can see 4 quadrants. This is the full map of AI services. Top left is physical plus generative. Top right is virtual plus generative. Bottom left is physical plus discriminative. Bottom right is virtual plus discriminative. Or sometimes it's more advanced, it will have some generative function. This is a very useful managerial map. It helps us locate it. different AI service applications instead of treating them all as the same thing. For example, a robot vacuum belongs in the physical plus discriminative area. A traditional chatbot belongs in the virtual plus discriminative area. Traditional one. Now, I am not mentioned the contemporary chatbot with LLM. So the chatbot with LLM, just like a ChatGPT style assistant, move into the virtual plus generative area. And future humanoid robots equipped with large language model, just like I mentioned, LLM, will move into the physical plus generative AI area. So this slide is not just a classification chart, it's a navigation map for the future of service systems. Now we shift from service to marketing. This slide is visually very effective. On the left, we see a funnel representing analytical AI and optimization. On the right, we see a magic wand representing generative AI and creation. This contrast is exactly right for marketing. Analytical AI helps us narrow, rank, and optimize. It tells us whom to target, what to recommend, and how to price. Generative AI, by contrast, helps us create. It produces copy, images, videos, and even conversations. So in marketing, AI now has two engines. One engine helps us to design better, and the other helps us create faster and at scale. So let's look at the first marketing application, hyper-personalized content. If you look at the slide, the left side shows traditional segmentation, new customers, loyal customers, and potential customers, each receiving a somewhat different message. On the right side, we see many different versions of content being generated at scale. That contrast is the whole point. Traditional marketing personalization works at the segment level. Generative marketing pushes toward the individual level. Analytical AI tells us how to segment customers and identify what they might respond to. Generative AI then produces different versions of text, visuals, and offers tailored to those segments or even to individuals. So this slide shows the shift from segmentation to personalization at scale. Now we move to the second application, customer service. This slide uses a very powerful comparison. On the left, we see a traditional rule-based chatbot with menu options and rigid flow. On the right, we see a more human-like conversational AI assistant. This visual contrast is exactly what the title says. The evolution from automated service to human-like conversations. Traditional chatbots are efficient but limited. They work well when the customer's need fits a narrow script. Generative AI, especially large language model, LLM-based assistants, makes service interaction feel more natural, flexible, and responsive. But this also introduces new risks, such as hallucinations, inconsistency, or overpromising. So the opportunity is bigger, but so is the responsibility. The third application is ideation and design. If you look at the image, we see a designer working with a screen that transforms a rough sketch into a more polished visual concept. This is a very good representation of AI as a creative partner. That is why the phrase at the bottom is so important. Augmentation, not replacement. Generative AI can accelerate brainstorming, produce many concept variations quickly, and lower the cost of experimentation, but the human still plays the critical role of test, judgment, and final selection. So the best way to read this slide is not AI replaces designers, but AI expands the designer's creative workspace. So this slide gives us a brief summary, also a strategic map of the new marketing role. If you look at the 2x2 matrix, the vertical dimension distinguishes analytical from generative, while the horizontal dimension contrasts internal efficiency with external experience. This means marketing managers now have to operate across 4 different areas: analytical plus efficiency, analytical plus experience, generative plus efficiency, generative plus experience. So the new role of marketing managers is no longer just campaign planning or budget allocation. It is about orchestrating multiple AI capabilities across both operational and experiential dimensions. Now we move to the third major part of this lesson, the customer experience side. This slide presents Pontoni's AI experience framework. The diagram is dense, but the key takeaway is that customer experience with AI can be understood through 4 major dimensions: data capture, classification, delegation, and social interaction. This is the conceptual map. We will unpack in the next 4 slides. The big idea is that AI creates both benefits and psychological tensions. In other words, consumers may feel helped, but also watched, understood, but also stereotyped, empowered, but also repressed, connected, but also alienated. Let's begin with the first dimension, data capture. If you look at the slide, the contrast is very direct. On the left, we see a navigation app that clearly provides useful service. On the right, we see a conversational AI interface that may involve far more personal and sensitive input. And at the bottom, the contrast is summarized in 2 words, served versus exploited. This is the tension of data capture. The more data AI collects, the more useful and personalized the service can become. But at the same time, the customer may begin to wonder, am I being served or am I being mined? So the key managerial question here is not just how much data can be captured, but how transparently and ethically that data is collected and used. Now, we come to the second dimension, classification. The images on the slide are very revealing. On the left, we see recommendation logic such as what Netflix shows you. On the right, we see AI-generated images that may reflect stereotype assumptions. For example, certain role being associated with certain gender or appearance. That is why the slide frames the tension as understood versus misunderstood. When AI classifies us correctly, we feel seen and understood. The service feels relevant and personalized. But when the classification is wrong, or when it is biased, it can feel limiting, unfair, or even offensive. So, classification is not only a technical issue, it is also a cultural and ethical issue. The third dimension is delegation. This slide uses a balanced scale again, and that is exactly the right visual. On one side, AI helps us by generating many ideas, accelerating work, and reducing effort. On the other side, AI may begin to threaten people's sense of competence, identity, and value. That is why the contrast is empowered versus repressed. Delegation can feel liberating when AI handles tedious or low-value tasks. But when AI begins to perform tasks that people associate with creativity, expertise, or professional identity, the psychological response can become much more complicated. So the lesson here is that dedication is not only about efficiency, it is about how people feel about their own role. Now we arrive at the fourth dimension, social interaction. Again, the slide uses a balanced image, and the tension is between connected and alienated. On the left, the reference to Her, the movie, suggests emotional connection with AI. On the right, the chatbot interface suggests the possibility of a cold, limited, or even frustrating interaction. This is one of the most fascinating dimensions of AI. Generative AI can now produce language that feels warm, empathic, and responsive. That creates the possibility of emotional connection, but it also creates new risks. Artificial intimacy, misplaced trust, and disappointment when the system fails or hallucinations. So the social dimension reminds us that interaction quality is not only about whether the system replies. It is about how that reply makes people feel. So the final content slide is extremely important because it shows us where the balance should be. If you look at the 4 quadrants, each one names a principle for data, transparency and control for classification, diversity and fairness. For delegation, human in the loop rather than full replacement. For social interaction, transparency in disclosing AI use, along with empathy. At the center, the slide places the phrase sweet spot. That is exactly the right conclusion. The goal is not maximum automation at any cost. The goal is to design AI experiences that are useful, fair, empowering, and emotionally responsible. So for service and marketing professionals, the challenge is not simply to use more AI. It is to use AI in a way that creates value without undermining trust. So this slide brings us to the end of lesson 5. Today we saw that AI is transforming service and marketing through both analytical and generative capabilities. We also explored how customers do not experience AI only as convenience. They also experience it psychologically through trust, fairness, empowerment, and connection. In the next lesson, we will move toward the future-facing issue of AI, including broader strategic implication, governance, and emerging development. In other words, after understanding what AI is doing now, we will ask what comes next and what we should care about it.